Hello, thank you for joining me once again. I am reading The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. We are on chapter 20, part 3, on page 305 at the part of Back to the Fall. This has been a wonderful read. I know many of you have been enjoying this just as I have, and I'm really, really grateful for all the encouragement, those that have been following along. I'm grateful and thankful. So as I continue to read, please share the information. Get the book, give the book. Like, subscribe, share, just receive the information. So without further ado, let's get down to this, okay? Back to the Fall on page 305 in chapter 20. Later that year, after I digested some of the earlier concepts and had some realizations, we had another discussion about the whole Adam and Eve soulmate split concept. Father, I understand much of what we previously discussed about the Adam and Eve fall allegory now in a new light. But would you explain more about the idea of Eve being the first to be tempted? When we are functioning as whole angelic beings, the one being's female elements are on the perimeter, our outside, so to speak. And the male elements are on the inside, just like the planets are on the outside or perimeter areas of a solar system or electrons outside the nucleus of an atom. That's why Eve went first, so to speak. Let's use the solar system as an example again. Because the female element is on the outside, it is the first to make contact with other things outside the system. For example, our solar system travels through space as one whole thing, one being, which it is. Now, if it were to come upon a solar system eating monster, who would get eaten first? The planet that was the farthest out from the center, the planet that was on the outside, most periphery. And these are female elements of this one solar system being. Thus, when we came upon the trap of the material plane, the outermost planes of our being, the female elements of our angelic whole being, were affected first and were the first to separate off from us as a whole, the Eve principle. Then later, the center, or the male element of our being, got exposed too, and also drawn into separation. Adam seemingly following Eve's lead. But remember, we are one being. It was us as a whole angelic being who fell into separation, not women only. It is not women that caused men to fall. It was just the first element of us to experience the temptations of the new plane, and the first part of us to separate and become lost. Adam, the first to return. So the female element broke away first. Does that mean that they must also be the first to return to the male element in order for the reuniting of soulmates to take place? Not at all, Peniel. As you learned long ago, the ancient manuscripts revealed that the Adam referred to in the Bible was actually an Atlantean. And not just any Atlantean. This was the same entity who, in one of his later Atlantean incarnations, was Master Thoth, the Grand Master of the Children of the Law of One. This was also the same entity who was later known as many others, including Jesus. The meaning of this is staggering. Not only was he the first human male being of the second wave, to separate from the universal spirit, he was also the first to return to oneness. And because he was the first to return to oneness, he was of the highest consciousness. This also made him the best guide to others trying to achieve what he had already achieved. That's why he is considered our Grand Master. It's not just some little title, it's not just some title or position he was appointed to. And because consciousness continues to grow and expand, and he was the first to return to universal consciousness, he is always a step ahead of the rest of us, and thus always of the highest consciousness. He was thus the guide of the children, their spiritual leader, if you will, from even before the days of Atlantis, then on throughout many of his incarnations and beyond. We continue to walk in his footsteps when we leave this plane. That is incredible, but it doesn't quite answer my question. Let me finish. You have the idea backwards. If the female element must rejoin the male first, and the female has achieved higher consciousness or enlightenment, which they would need to if they were seeking to rejoin with their soulmate, what would they be rejoining to? A normal selfish man? How could that work? It's the opposite. And that is why I was telling you about Master Thoth. When he returned to oneness, he rejoined his connection, his link to God. And in doing so, and becoming thus enlightened, he made it possible for his higher consciousness, female soulmates, to join him in this return also. Otherwise, if he was still separate, still lost, still selfish, they would have had to bypass him if they chose to return to oneness. This is a very important point, and how he made it possible is where the story of Adam and Eve intersects with and becomes quite relevant to the spiritual path. How's that? Remember that Eve, because of the outer nature of the female element within us, was the first element to separate from oneness and fall into darkness. The Adam element followed, and getting kicked out of paradise was not far behind. This was, in a sense, the creation of the first path. It was the path taken by leaving oneness. From then on, a way back to oneness with the universal spirit has existed and been awaiting our recognition and return. The path of unselfish love. In the right order, polarities vanish to become one flow. As was said earlier, everything in the entire universe orbits something else. Electrons orbit nuclei. Moons orbit the planets. Planets orbit the stars. Stars orbit black holes. Black holes orbit. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Stars orbit black holes. Black holes orbit. This process, just as in an atom, requires polarity, requires having opposite sexes, requires the receptive qualities and outflowing qualities. And this is where male and female come in. But in order for everything to function as one harmonious thing, it also requires all the polarities to be in the right order. This is because the flow of the circle of universal energy moves in only one direction. Zayn explained it to me using the ideal of the star exercise, which is very much like a basic electric circuit. The star exercise reflects this great principle, this great universal pattern. What is what is it when do we what is it we do when we do the star exercise alone, Peniel? That was a tongue twister. We take in universal life energy through our breathing and through our left hand, which we visualize as receptive. Receptive like the female principle, yes? Yes. Go on. Then the energy passes through us and we send it out through the right hand. Again, we control the flow of this energy with our visualization. So we visualize it going out the right hand, and the energy flows, and the energy follows our thought, yes? But when done in with a circle of people linking together by holding hand, the energy flows in a circle, going in a direction dictated by the fact that the left hand is receptive and the right hand is outflowing. If one person is not receptive on the left, the flow stops for all. But when everyone is submissive and receptive in their proper place and outflowing in their proper place, all become one. All becomes one, is one. There is no inequality, no beginning, or no end of the flow in the circle. It no longer comes from the positive pole and goes to the negative pole. It is always just flowing. It just is. As in consciousness and life, there is always someone below you and someone above you. But it doesn't matter. The chain is one, the flow is one, and when you plug into it, all are simply the one. This is the way of the universe and the way of soulmates who have achieved the consciousness, putting the batteries in the wrong way. So the fall was like letting go of each other's hands, turning around in different direction towards each other, wandering off, etc. Very much so when we manifested on earth and eventually separated into male and female parts, selfishness sets in. Selfishness set in. The great circle was broken. And it was, as you just said, all the jumbled up of our polarities badly and our ability to receptive in our own proper place and outflowing in our proper place. Just as if someone were trying to do the star exercise facing one direction and someone were trying to do it facing the other direction, and none were making the great circle. It's just it's a big polarity mess. So, Father, is this polarity mix up and separation why all men chase after women instead of chasing God as they should be? Yes. When we, our soulmate groups, were just one being, our polarities were in order, and harmony reigned within us and with our connection to God. But our male and female parts reversed polarity when we separated from the one. That's because our separation was the result of turning away from being receptive, female principle, to the universal spirit and submissive to universal will. We turned away 180 degrees, totally opposite of the way we need to be for us to be in our proper order. Then the male and female parts separated within each of the beings that had separated from the one. The female and male elements also essentially turned 180 degrees from each other in order for separation to occur. You can see this in magnets. If you turn them one way, they attract and join together physically and with their energy fields, but if you turn them 180 degrees in another direction, they repel and separate. So, what male and female elements are truly supposed to be in the spiritual or angelic state got scrambled in the human state, and the normal polarities of male and female sort of reversed. You can't be truly in either the receptive female or outflowing male polarity if you were cut off from the universal flow. Both men and women are lost if they are not one with the universal spirit. Thus, men are insecure and confused about what they are supposed to really be. They are confused about both their masculine and their female receptive side. Many block their feminine side by generating hostile thoughts about homosexuality. But their feminine side doesn't really have to do with homosexuality. It has to do with internal balance and being receptive to God. Their receptive side is the very thing that gives them the ability to be attracted to be a wife to the universal spirit, which then allows them to be a true father and giver to everyone else. Our lost and selfish state of present existence, men desire to attach themselves to women rather than to the universal spirit. And in women's confused and lost state, many women try to get men to be attracted to them and to get men to do what they want them to do, rather than urging the man to seek the universal spirit and follow universal will. Then, when women finally get men attached to them and get men to do what they want, what do? They don't like the men anymore because they are weak. Yes, they get repulsed. They end up having no respect for the men they can control, even after they tried so hard to control them. They ultimately feel that the men they control are somewhat loathsome and repellent. And then they begin to nag or be what they call a bitch to the men, etc. Of course they do. This is only natural. She is virtually driven by nature to nag a weak man. The man is selfish, needy of her. The woman senses the man is all wrong. This is how it goes when men are not right with themselves and the universal spirit. But they still do it. They still have relationships. Sure, but like what? Many women have decided that men are either little boys that want a woman to be like a mother to them, or they have decided that men are brutal and abusive or just jerks. And it's all true depending on the course the man has taken. Some women have given up on finding a decent man. Some settle for a man because they think they can find no one any better, or no one perfect. Some have turned to their own sex. But what most women think men are is not what they really are. At least it's not what they are meant to be. An average normal man is polarity reversed. They suck energy rather than giving it. A real man is one with the universal spirit and radiates. And while they still have the masculine qualities, they have a very different nature than what most women have come to expect. A real man, a spiritual man, is in control of himself, and his strength is not macho force, but rather it is the strength of the universal spirit that permeates him and flows through him from deep inside. He's not dominant. He does not dominate women and his environment by force and selfishness. He radiates the light of God within him, and that automatically influences his environment with the strongest force there is, unselfish love. Are you saying it's all men's fault? No. Why do you have to go to such extreme polarities? It either has to be men's fault or women's fault to you. No, Father. It's just, I guess, I don't have a full understanding yet. And the last thing you said led me to believe that men were at fault. The things I said did not lead you to believe that. You led yourself to believe that. That's true. I'm sorry. I did an affirmation to myself. I am always humble. Men certainly need to get it together. Get back to God first. But women aren't totally blameless here. If a woman really wants to change and find the right kind of man, there are men out there who are one with the universal spirit, or at least dedicated to achieving that. Granted, there are very few, but a higher consciousness woman who asks the universal spirit for guidance in this will find what they are looking for. But many women would rather attach themselves to a man who isn't attached to the universal spirit, because the woman doesn't want to be receptive to the universal spirit either, because she is selfish and wants to remain that way. And they know they have to go through the same changes as the male, which means the death of the selfish, separate self. A woman who wants an unselfishly loving man must eventually become unselfishly loving also. And just as with men, not that men, not just as with men, not that many women are willing to do what is necessary to achieve that either. As you know, many men chase after women, and many women support that behavior, and they are just as much to blame for all the problems as long as they take such an attitude. So we live in a world full of polarity mixed up, selfish men and women. Of course, it all makes one big mess. It all makes for one big mess. It cannot work. This is all out of polar balance and causes all kinds of relationship problems. Can you imagine the chaos in the universe if the stars and planets behaved this way? Can you imagine what would happen if the planets tried to lure the sun and the sun broke out of its orbit and began chasing after other planets? It would cause a chain reaction of disaster and chaos all over the universe. The polarities must take their proper places, or discord will never end. Problems with partners of different conscious levels. But with such fragmentation, how can anyone ever hope to find their soulmates and return to harmony with them, since they are all likely to be at different levels of consciousness? You have two different questions there. Sometimes people will already be living with their soulmates, usually unknowingly. And it is the worst relationship they ever had. This is due to a couple of things. For one, they have strong internal bonds and karmic ties that draw them together. But remember, these people who were once a harmonious soulmate group separated from God, and then from each other in selfishness. They thus had strongly opposing feelings and attitudes and thus took opposing directions in life. So when soulmates get back together because of karma rather than because they both have evolved and become more loving, higher consciousness beings, the spark of conflict can really fly. But even though this is often an intense and very upsetting type of relationship, it can sometimes be a good scenario for growth. Such a relationship is full of turmoil, as each person is forced to constantly battle with each other's and their own egos and selfishness. The growth can come from transcending the turmoil, facing yourself honestly, and using the mirror your partner shoves in your face as a guide for changing yourself. But often such undeveloped soulmates can't take the heat of the relationship and will break up with the worse karma between them than they had before. If partners who find themselves in a soulmate relationship are at a similar levels of consciousness, but not really the same level, they can either grow together or keep each other down. But if one partner is of a higher state or growing faster, they may need to separate if the other partner refuses to catch up or keep pace. Unfortunately, in most relationships, soulmate or not, one partner will advance on their spiritual path beyond the other partner. It is very, very rare that two people move at the same pace in the same direction, even those who have shared spiritual paths. This leaves the other bewildered and usually hostile, can often result in harmful attempts to manipulate the higher consciousness partner and keep them down spiritually. Often because of the natural receptivity and sensitivity of the female principle, female soulmates learn their karmic lessons sooner than male counterparts. They also find it easier to be humble and receptive with a true teacher that does a, than does a male principle. There are two exceptions, of course, but there are many women on spiritual paths that have no spiritual equal or spiritual better male counterpart in their life. Sometimes it's just because they don't really want that, and all the real final changes it would entail for them, but other times it's just that there isn't anyone around. This presents a great problem because of the following prerequisites of the path. Just as Eve left Adam, just as Eve left and Adam followed to get back, Adam must return first, then Eve will have the opportunity to go with him also. Fortunately, universal law provides a solution in such cases. If Adam does not return first, Eve can find another Adam if she wishes to. Unfortunately, for the men, the burden is on the men to surrender to the universal spirit first, before their soulmates, or they leave no viable alternative to their female counterparts. This is not as bad as it may sound, though, for at those levels of consciousness, we achieve the primary perfect male and female archetype again, and it is just as totally satisfying and comfortable for the female to be with the new soulmate as the old, as long as the old soulmate has not achieved enlightenment and is being rejected. So, can a higher consciousness woman help the man they are with raise their consciousness so they can be with them in harmony? Many women attempt to change and improve their men. I have never seen it work, nor do I know anyone who has. For whatever reason, it seems that men must either learn from the school of hard knocks or a true teacher. It is a part of their false male ego. They refuse to truly grow or accept their female soulmates as their teacher, let alone equal. It could be that a woman might just happen to start teaching a man at the same time he has actually decided to change on his own. And it might work out. Or they think they are teaching one. But it ultimately breaks down, or it is false teaching. But from everything I've seen and know of, they cannot truly make a man seek the light or serve the universal will. And attempting to do so, even if temporary results seem to have been achieved, will only fail and impair the woman's own development. But, like I said, it is very fortunate for the female that she can find a new soulmate. That is just as fulfilling, just as real as the original, should the original fail to achieve their enlightenment. Real romance reuniting with your soulmate. So, Father, bottom line, as far as soulmates go, we are all just up a creek without a paddle for the most part. Not at all. But for soulmates to harmoniously reunite, it requires both the male and female elements to truly want God, so to speak, to be receptive to the universal spirit and universal will. The male soulmate must be the first to change his polarity and become receptive to the universal will. It's like he needs to traditionally marry, love, serve, and obey, etc. But it is the universal spirit he must do this with, and have nothing else more dominant in his life. A man who has done this can remain one with the universal will and consciousness, regardless of whether his soulmates are with him. This allows him to be able to wait for his soulmate to appear in his life. And when she shows up or is already in his life, if she is of lower consciousness, he can patiently wait or help her to catch up to him while he still remains in the universal flow. And thus her negative or lower consciousness cannot throw him off. It also allows him to become the soulmate of a woman who has no hope of retrieving her original soulmate, either because he has gone on to higher planes already or because her original soulmate is of lower consciousness. If a woman has realized she must return to the universal spirit and her soulmate has not, she may jump soul groups and find another male who she has an infinity with and who is appropriately spiritually oriented. This new male will become her new soulmate. While this may seem disappointing, it is not really, and is far better than the alternative. This new soulmate is just as valid as the original, and there is just as much love. It can also be possible that a soulmate has evolved more rapidly and already left the earth plane. In the case of a man whose soulmate has already gone on, it is it is too late. But as mentioned above, another woman who is without her original soulmate may jump to another enlightened man and become his soulmate. This is not allowed to be an enlightened man's choice, though, nor would he want it to be if he were enlightened. For it is only the female who is allowed to choose who to attach to. When polarities are functioning in their proper order, in harmony with universal flow. Just as the planets choose what sun they will orbit. Also, in the case of a woman whose original soulmate has already gone on, she can choose a new soulmate. But in both cases, a man or woman may rejoin their original soulmates after leaving the earth plane, although it is unlikely to happen because usually by that time it isn't desired anymore because they are just as harmonious and happy with their new soulmate situation. The right kind of soulmate rejoining is something I have dreamed of since I was a child, Father. And while I have finally let go of my desires and am totally focused on serving the universal spirit, it still seems like a wondrous thing. Peniel, it will come to you. I have seen it, and you are right. When soulmates join in higher consciousness, it is a time to rejoice. It is also a beautiful thing to behold, for it changes and expands the nature of their whole beingness together, like two or more caterpillars going into a cocoon and emerging as one incredible butterfly. The male and female elements combine all their individual gifts and traits. But as in procreation, the sum of this union is greater than just the total of the two. Much more is created from the interplay of their combined energies. Thus, aspects of a new being are created. The soulmate elements function together as one, and a physically bonded team working toward the same goal. One final thing to think about. We can have more than one original soulmate. Contemplate it. Think about why. I am through for now. I have other work I must attend to. Thank you, Father. Okay, that's the end of chapter 20. So we are now on chapter 21, Earth Changes in You. Thank you once again for taking the time to listen as I read The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. A very, very, very good book. In my opinion, reasons why I've chosen to share it and challenge myself to read. It's taken me a little bit longer than I expected it would. However, when it's done, it will all be done and we are almost there. So thank you once again. Please share, like, subscribe, and have a wonderful day.